I'm Nathan Lane, I'm 32 years old, and my own father called me an embarrassment and uninvited me from his retirement party, right after he tricked me into signing a document that put a financial gun to my head. Before I tell you how I systematically dismantled his entire $30 million empire and took back my life, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. It all started on a Tuesday, which for me was just another day in the belly of the beast. The beast, in this case, was Lane Auto Parts, the company my father built and my older brother, Jacob, was systematically running into the ground. My day began, as it often did, with the shrill sound of an alarm. Not my alarm clock, but the piercing siren from a mainline CNC machine that had failed. Again, I was on the factory floor before the sun was fully up, the air thick with that familiar, almost comforting smell of hot metal and industrial lubricant. A smell I used to associate with progress and family pride. Lately, it just smelled like my life. Overworked and breaking down. Gus, the plant foreman, was already there. His face a mask of weary resignation. Gus was a good man, tough as nails, who'd worked for my father since before I was born. He didn't have to say a word. We both knew the cause. "Let me guess," I said, pulling on a pair of work gloves. "The coolant feed line on number 3? He just nodded, pointing a thick finger at a pathetic-looking plastic fitting that was cracked and dripping a sickly green fluid onto the concrete. "Third time this month, Nate. That whole batch of fittings your brother ordered is pure junk. They get brittle with the heat." My brother, Jacob, the company's vice president of procurement. A title that sounded impressive but really meant he was an expert at finding the cheapest, shoddiest materials from overseas suppliers to make his department's budget look stellar on a spreadsheet. Meanwhile, the rest of us were left to deal with the shrapnel. I spent the next 3 hours on my back, covered in grease, bypassing the faulty part and custom fabricating a replacement from a solid block of high-grade aluminum I had stashed away for emergencies. It was overkill, a solution worth $500 to fix a $5 part, but I knew it would never break again. By the time I was finished, my back was screaming, my stomach was empty, and my hands were stained black. I trudged up to the front offices, the corporate wing. It was always like entering another country. The noise and grit of the factory floor gave way to hushed carpets, quiet phones, and the faint scent of air freshener. My father, Warren Lane, was a king in this domain. He sat behind a desk the size of a small car, a monument to his own importance. He didn't look up when I entered. "Is it fixed?" he asked, his eyes locked on a stock ticker. "It's fixed for good," I replied, staying on my feet. "Dad, we can't keep using these parts. Jacob's cost-cutting is going to lead to a catastrophic failure one of these days." He finally looked at me, but his eyes were dismissive. He held up a hand. "I don't have time for your operational whining, Nathan." He slid a thin blue folder across the polished expanse of his desk. "I need your signature. Just some standard paperwork. We're restructuring an old credit line to improve our terms." I hesitated. Every nerve ending screamed at me to stop, to demand to read every word. But I was exhausted. I'd fought this exact battle 100 times before, and the outcome was always the same. It would end with him questioning my loyalty, accusing me of not seeing the big picture. It was easier to just surrender. It had always been easier. I picked up the pen. I flipped to the last page, saw the line with my name typed beneath it, and signed. "Good," he said, pulling the folder back with a flick of his wrist. "That's all. Dismissed. Not a thank you for your 3 hours of labor. Not a good job on the fix. Just an abrupt end to the conversation." As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out in the hallway. It was a text message from him. From the man sitting less than 20 feet away. It read, "Don't come to my retirement party next month. You're an embarrassment." I froze, the blood turning to ice in my veins. An embarrassment. I looked down at my hands, stained with the grease of his company. I thought of the blind trust one had just placed in his hands with my signature. And in that moment, something deep inside me, a foundation of duty and hope that had been cracking for years, finally shattered into dust. I walked out of the building, got into my truck, and just sat there, staring at the steering wheel. The silence in the cab was deafening. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over his name. I wanted to call him, to scream, to ask him why. But I knew it was pointless. Instead, I scrolled down to a different name. Danielle Keller. She answered immediately. Nate? You never call in the middle of the day. Everything okay? My voice was a dry rasp. Danielle, I said. I've been a fool. I signed something. I need a lawyer. Danielle Keller and I went way back. We'd survived undergrad engineering classes together before she saw the light and went to law school. She was brilliant, fiercely loyal, and one of the only people on earth who knew the full, unvarnished truth about the dynamics of the Lane family. She was also now one of the most sought-after corporate lawyers in the state. We met the next morning at a small, anonymous diner halfway between her downtown office and my plant. The smell of frying bacon and stale coffee hung in the air. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the words from my father's text message glowing in the dark. I pushed a copy of the contract I'd managed to snag from the office across the vinyl tabletop. My hand was shaking slightly. He said it was just restructuring. I repeated, the words sounding even more foolish in the light of day. I was exhausted. I didn't fight him on it. I just signed. Stop, she said, her voice firm but kind as she pulled the documents toward her. Stop blaming yourself. You were conditioned to do this, Nate. Your whole life has been a training exercise in trusting him against your better judgment. She fell silent then, her sharp eyes scanning the pages with an unnerving speed. She was all business now. While she read, my mind drifted, pulled back into the gravitational field of my family's history, searching for the moment the rails had come off. The truth is, they were never on the rails to begin with. My role was cast the day I was born. The reliable, quiet, second son. The workhorse. Jacob, 2 years my senior, was the star, the charismatic heir. He had the charm, the smile, the easy confidence of a man who had never had to clean up his own messes. I was the one who did that. I remembered one summer when we were in our early 20s. We just landed a huge contract with a national auto parts retailer. It was our biggest deal ever, and it was contingent on us meeting a series of brutal deadlines. I spent 3 months working 80-hour weeks, personally rewriting the logistics software and redesigning the packing lines to increase efficiency. We hit every deadline. My father was ecstatic. He threw a dinner for the executives from the retail chain. At that dinner, he stood up and raised a glass. To my son Jacob, he'd announced proudly, whose innovative sales strategies and leadership made this all possible. Jacob had stood up and soaked in the applause, even winking at me over his champagne glass. I just sat there, my fork suddenly feeling heavy in my hand, a silent engine in a victory parade that wasn't for me. Then came the loan. 2 years ago, the company needed $3 million for an equipment upgrade. An upgrade I had personally researched and spec'd out. But the banks were getting nervous. Jacob's personal finances were a disaster area, credit card debt, a flashy sports car he couldn't afford, and my father had a habit of running the company's finances right on the edge. They called me into the office. The throne room. It was the same setup as always. Dad, the king behind his desk. Jacob, the prince, lounging in a visitor's chair. They didn't ask. They told. The bank needs a stronger position, Warren had said, his voice flat. Your credit is spotless. Your name on the loan will get it done. It's for the family, Nate, Jacob had added, as if he were bestowing a great honor upon me. We're all in this together. We're all in this together. The phrase was a lie then, and it was a lie now. We weren't in it together. I was at the bottom of the pyramid, holding everything up while they sat at the top, enjoying the view. But I signed. I signed because I thought that was what a good son, a good brother, was supposed to do. I thought it was my duty. That signature was a turning point. After that, the exclusion that had always been subtle became overt. I was accidentally left off the distribution list for important financial summaries. Meetings about strategic planning were scheduled when they knew I was tied up on the factory floor. I was being walled off brick by brick from the company I was working so hard to save. When I tried to ask Gordon Maddox, the company's longtime accountant, about the changes, he would just fidget and avoid eye contact. New security protocols, Nathan, he'd mumble, shuffling papers on his desk. Orders from the top. My hands are tied. Gordon was a company man, a product of my father's world. He was a walking embodiment of just following orders, and his fear of my father was a palpable thing. Back in the diner, Danielle let out a low whistle. It was a sound that pulled me from my reverie and sent a chill down my spine. She looked up from the contract, her face grim. Nate, this is a masterpiece. A sick, twisted, but legally brilliant masterpiece of screwing someone over. What is it? I asked, my throat dry. Okay, let's start with the old news. That $3 million loan from 2 years ago. She pulled out a pen. I looked it up this morning. You're right, you signed it. But it wasn't a standard loan. They set it up as a convertible note with some very aggressive covenant clauses. A what? Covenants. The words felt foreign, dangerous. Covenants are rules the company has to follow to keep the loan in good standing, she explained, her voice patient, like a teacher explaining a difficult concept. Things like maintaining a certain debt-to-income ratio or a certain level of profitability. If the company breaks these rules, if it breaches the covenants, the lender can declare the entire loan due immediately. Or, in this case, she tapped the file. They have the right to convert the debt into company stock. They can take a piece of the company. I felt a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. And Jacob's spending. Jacob's spending, his deals for cheap parts that lead to production shutdowns, the money he's bleeding. It's driving the company's performance straight towards a breach. But here's the part you didn't know, Nate. You're not just a co-signer on that note. The way they structured it, your personal credit and assets are listed as the primary collateral. They put you, not the company's assets, on the hook. I could only stare at her. So, when Jacob's incompetence finally sinks the numbers, the bank can come after my house. Your house, your savings, your 401k. Everything, she confirmed, her eyes hard. But that's not the worst part. That's just the old trap. This, she slid the new contract, the one I just signed, back towards me. This is the new one. This is the kill shot. I braced myself. This isn't a restructuring of old debt, Nate. This is a personal guarantee. It's called a cross-collateralization agreement. It's a creditor's document. What does it do? I whispered. It takes all of your personal assets, the ones already at risk from the first loan, and it pledges them as collateral for a new $5 million line of credit that your father and brother are applying for. The application was filed yesterday afternoon, right after you signed. The air left my lungs. $5 million? For what? According to the application, it's for strategic brand development, which includes a new vanity side project for Jacob to import and brand luxury Italian car accessories. It's a high-risk, low-reward gamble. It all crashed down on me then, the full, horrifying weight of their plan. It was a two-stage execution. The first contract made me responsible for their past failures. The new one made me the bank for their future fantasies. They were going to use my good credit to get $5 million, wasted on Jacob's latest whim, and when it all inevitably failed, the bank would seize my entire life to cover the loss. The company's original loan would default, and they would walk away from the wreckage, leaving me buried beneath it. I thought of the text. You're an embarrassment. It wasn't just a cruel insult. It was a strategy. They were pushing me out of the family so that when the financial collapse came, they could point their fingers at the disgraced, incompetent son who had somehow ruined them. I wasn't family. I was their exit strategy. I was their scapegoat. They're going to destroy me, I said, the words hollow. That's the play, Danielle said, her voice filled with a cold fury that matched my own. They get all the upside, you take all the risk. It's the most predatory use of familial trust I've ever seen. I looked down at my hands, resting on the table. They were the hands of a mechanic, calloused and capable. They could fix anything. But this was a problem I couldn't solve with a wrench. A strange calm washed over me. The panic and despair receded, replaced by something hard and clear. It was the calm of a man who has already lost everything, and therefore has nothing left to lose. Okay, I said, my voice steady and low. I looked up and met Danielle's gaze. They've built a perfect trap. So you and I are going to build a better one. We're going to use their own rules, their own greed against them. You said they're close to breaching the covenants on the first loan. Dangerously close, she confirmed. Then let's give them a push, I said. Let's prove to the bank that the company isn't just underperforming. It's being actively sabotaged from the inside by its own leadership. Let's trigger the default on our terms. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Danielle's face. Nate, I've been waiting 32 years for you to get angry, she said. Let's go to war. The war room was my small kitchen table. The battle plans were scrawled on a legal pad. The objective was simple. Gather enough undeniable evidence to prove to the bank that Lane Auto Parts was a ship being intentionally steered towards an iceberg by its own captains. Danielle was my general, mapping out the legal strategy. I was her soldier on the ground, tasked with infiltrating enemy territory. My first mission was to substantiate the quiet rot on the factory floor. I found Gus the next morning, before the first shift started, in his tiny office overlooking the plant. The fluorescent lights hummed, casting long shadows. I closed the door, a gesture that signaled this was not a normal conversation. Gus, I began, keeping my voice low. I'm going to ask you to do something that could put your job on the line. But I swear to you, it's to save the company, not to hurt it. He leaned back in his ancient, squeaking chair, his eyes narrowed. He'd worked for my father for nearly 40 years. His loyalty was deep, but he was also a man of integrity, and he'd seen the slow decay firsthand. What do you need, Nathan? The parts Jacob is ordering are junk. We know this, I said. But what I need to know is what's happening to our premium inventory. The high-grade steel stock, the German-made bearings, the stuff we used to use before he started his cost-saving initiatives. Gus's jaw worked silently for a moment. He glanced at the closed door, then leaned forward across his desk. You didn't hear it from me, he whispered, his voice a gravelly rumble. But about twice a month, usually on a Friday after most of the office staff has gone home, a private truck shows up. No company logo, nothing. Jacob himself oversees the loading. Pallets of our best stuff. Prime inventory. He signs the manifest, lists it as a transfer to a subsidiary holding. But we don't have a subsidiary holding, Nate. The stuff just disappears. The breath caught in my throat. This was bigger than I thought. It wasn't just incompetence or wastefulness. It was methodical, organized theft. He's selling our assets out the back door for cash, I said, the ugly truth crystallizing, and using the cheap parts to cover the inventory gaps on the books. Looks that way, Gus confirmed, his face grim. Can you get me proof? I asked. Copies of those manifests? Security footage from the loading bay on those nights. He looked at his hands, calloused and worn from a lifetime of honest labor. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He was being asked to betray the man who had signed his paychecks for 4 decades. He's destroying everything you helped my father build. Gus, I said softly, this place will be a parking lot in a year if we don't do something. He met my gaze, and in his eyes, I saw the pride of a craftsman finally outweigh the fear of a subordinate. He gave a slow, firm nod. I'll see what I can pull. Don't contact me about it here. Check a personal email. Step 1 was in motion. My next target was the financial heart of the company. The accounting servers. I needed the real numbers, the ones that showed the cash bleed from Jacob's projects and the true cost of his backdoor sales. This meant getting past Gordon Maddox. I tried the subtle approach first. I caught him in the break room, pouring himself a cup of coffee. His hands trembled slightly, as they always seemed to do. Gordon, I said casually, I've been looking at the quarterly production numbers, and they don't seem to line up with the revenue reports I've seen. Could you grant me temporary access to the detailed expense ledgers? I think there might be a discrepancy I can help sort out. He nearly dropped his cup. A deer-in-the-headlights look flashed across his face. Oh no, Nathan, I can't do that, he stammered. wiping a coffee splash from his tie. Your father has instituted new security protocols. Very strict. All financial data is on a need-to-know basis now. My hands are tied. He used the exact same phrase as before, his shield against any responsibility. Gordon, I have a right to know what's going on in my own family's company. I pressed, keeping my voice even. Your father was very clear, he said, his eyes darting around the room, terrified someone might overhear. He lowered his voice. Don't push this, Nathan. For your own good. Just do your work and stay out of the finances. It's better for everyone. He scurried away, leaving me standing by the coffee machine. The direct approach was a dead end. Gordon was a locked door, and my father had the only key. I would need to find another way in. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove to my parents' house for an unannounced visit. The house was a monument to my father's success, a sprawling colonial that always felt more like a corporate headquarters than a home. I found my mother, Lynette, in the perfectly manicured garden, snipping roses. She was the picture of suburban grace, a woman whose entire life had been dedicated to maintaining the flawless facade of the Lane family. Nathan, she said, her smile a little too bright, a little too practiced. What a lovely surprise. I didn't have time for pleasantries. Mom, we're in trouble, I said, getting straight to the point. I laid it all out for her, right there amongst the pristine roses. I told her about the contracts, the ones that put me on the hook for millions. I told her what Gus had seen, about Jacob stealing the company blind. I was pleading, trying to find the mother beneath the corporate wife. I hoped to see a flash of outrage, a flicker of the fierce maternal protection I imagined other sons got from their mothers. What I got instead was a performance. She brought a delicate hand to her chest, her eyes wide with feigned shock. Oh, Nathan, there must be a misunderstanding, she said. Your father would never put you at risk. He loves you. Love. The word sounded absurd. Is that what you call this? He's using me as a financial shield for Jacob. He's preparing to sacrifice me to save him. How is that love? She sighed, the performance dropping for a moment, replaced by a weary resignation. Your brother, he just has a different way of doing things. He's more of a visionary, takes money to bring visions to life. Sometimes we have to make sacrifices for the good of the family. It was the same tired excuse, the same mantra they had all been chanting for years. And in that moment, hearing it from her lips, the last vestige of my hope that she could be an ally crumbled. Sacrifice. My voice was low, shaking with a cold rage I didn't know I possessed. I have sacrificed my entire adult life for this family. I've sacrificed my own career ambitions, my personal time, my peace of mind. Tell me, Mom, what has Jacob ever sacrificed? When have you ever sacrificed anything? Tears welled in her eyes. It was her go-to defense. You're being cruel, Nathan. You don't understand the pressures your father is under. Oh, I understand pressure. I shot back, the words like venom. I understand the pressure of knowing that my life's work and my entire financial future can be wiped out by my brother's latest whim. And I understand this. Your silence is the same as a signature on a contract. You are just as complicit as they are. You've made your choice. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, a solitary, tragic figure among her perfect flowers. The drive home was a blur of anger and a profound, hollowing grief. The betrayal from my mother was, in many ways, the cruelest cut of all. Confirmed my isolation. I was truly on my own. I got home and sat at my kitchen table, staring at the small pile of evidence I'd gathered. Felt hopelessly inadequate. The manifests from Gus were damning, but without the financial records to connect them to, they were just pieces of paper. I felt a wave of despair wash over me. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was just the workhorse, not smart enough to outwit them. Then, my laptop chimed with a new email notification. It was from a strange, encrypted address. The subject line was blank. My heart started to pound as I clicked it open. There was no text in the body of the email, just a single, small image file attached. I downloaded it and opened it. It was a photo of a sticky note, the kind that my mother always kept by her phone. On the note, in her elegant, familiar handwriting, were 2 lines. The first was an IP address. The second was a password. Legacy 1985. My breath hitched. 1985. The year my parents were married. The year my father founded the company. The beginning of the legacy. It was a backdoor password to the main server. A master key. My mother. She couldn't say the words. She couldn't stand beside me and fight. But in the quiet darkness of her own conscience, she had chosen a side. She had slipped me a weapon. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a full-throated cry for justice. But it was something. It was a chance. My hands trembled as I typed the IP address into my browser. I entered the password. A command prompt appeared on my screen. I was in. It took me hours, navigating the labyrinth of the company's digital architecture. I found the sanitized books, the ones Gordon showed the auditors. They were clean, pristine. But my mother's password didn't just give me user access. It gave me administrative privileges. It let me see the hidden partitions. And there it was. The real ledger. It was all there in stark black and white. A second set of books that detailed every single dirty secret. The money siphoned from the company to pay off Jacob's gambling debts. The cash from the backdoor inventory sales. The fraudulent expense reports. My father wasn't just an oblivious enabler. He was the architect of the entire deception. Then, I found the folder that made my blood run cold. It was labeled Project Arizona. Inside were the real financials for a major expansion project they had sold to a group of outside investors. The lead investor was a man named Mark Reynolds, a self-made billionaire with a reputation for being ruthless with people who crossed him. My father and Jacob had shown him a set of wildly inflated projections to secure a $2 million investment. The documents on the server showed that almost none of that money had actually gone to Arizona. It had been used as a slush fund to plug the holes in the company's finances caused by Jacob's other failures. They weren't just cheating their son. They were committing serious, wire fraud-level crimes against one of the most powerful men in the state. I leaned back in my chair, the glow from the monitor lighting up my face in the dark room. The game had changed. This wasn't just about saving myself from a bad contract anymore. I was holding a bomb, and the fuse was already lit. The only question was where and when I wanted it to detonate. And the answer was clear. The detonation would happen in public, and Mark Reynolds himself was going to light the match. The next 2 days were a blur of caffeine and methodical preparation. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. With the dynamite of the real ledger in my possession, my strategy shifted from defense to a full-scale offensive. Danielle worked tirelessly, helping me package the information into a format that was both legally explosive and easy for a layman to understand. We created 2 distinct dossiers. The first was a precise, clinical presentation for the bank. It focused on the breach of covenant clauses, using Gus's manifests and the production data to prove that the company's operational stability was being deliberately compromised. It was the legal lever, designed to put the bank on high alert and freeze any further credit. The second dossier was the real weapon. It was for Mark Reynolds. It was a narrative of deceit, starting with the fraudulent Project Arizona prospectus and ending with the real ledger showing where his $2 million had actually gone. It included details of Jacob's backdoor sales and the plan to use my assets to secure even more funding. It was designed to do one thing: make a very powerful, very rich man incandescent with rage. My plan was no longer about a dramatic public outburst. That was amateur hour. This was about a strategic corporate decapitation. To do that, I needed to approach Mark Reynolds not as a victim, but as a peer with a mutually beneficial proposition. Getting to him was the first hurdle. Men like Reynolds are surrounded by gatekeepers. I made the call from a payphone, untraceable, using the direct line to his executive assistant I'd found in my father's old Rolodex. "Mr. Reynolds' office." A crisp, professional voice answered. "Hello?" I said, pitching my voice to sound as calm and authoritative as I could. "My name is Nathan Lane. I need to speak with Mr. Reynolds regarding his investment in Lane Auto Parts." Please tell him it concerns a material misrepresentation in the Arizona project. I used the specific legal term Danielle had coached me on. It was a key that might unlock the door. There was a pause. Who may I say is calling? Nathan Lane. Warren Lane's son. The pause was longer this time. I could hear the faint sound of typing. Please hold. What felt like an eternity later, a new voice came on the line. It was deep, sharp, and radiated impatience. Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds, thank you for taking my call. I began. As I told your assistant, my name is Nathan Lane. I have uncovered documented, irrefutable proof that the projections you were shown for the Arizona expansion were fraudulent, and that your investment was diverted to cover operational losses stemming from mismanagement. The silence on the other end was heavy, analytical. That's a serious accusation, he said, his voice dangerously level. Why would a son be calling to burn down his own father's house? Because they're using my house for kindling? I shot back, the words coming out harder than I intended. They've trapped me in a series of personal guarantees that make me liable for the very debts they're racking up through this fraud. My personal and financial interests in exposing this have become aligned with yours. I'm not asking you to trust my word. I'm asking you to look at a folder of evidence that will speak for itself. Give me 30 minutes. Another long silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, calculating the odds, weighing the risks. My downtown office. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., he said finally. Bring your folder. And Nathan, don't waste my time. He hung up. I let out a shuddering breath, my hand gripping the receiver. I had done it. I had gotten through the door. The next morning, I walked into the lobby of Reynolds Capital. It was like stepping into a different dimension. All chrome, glass, and hushed, expensive silence. It was a world built on numbers and power, a world my father had always aspired to but never truly belonged in. Mark Reynolds was older than I expected, probably in his late 60s, but he had the coiled energy of a man half his age. His eyes were the most intelligent and intimidating I had ever seen. He didn't smile or offer a handshake. He simply gestured to a leather chair. You have my attention. The clock is ticking. I didn't flinch. I opened my briefcase and laid the dossier on his desk. It was thick, meticulously organized, with tabs for each section. Mr. Reynolds, this is not just an accusation. It's a balance sheet. I walked him through it with cold, emotionless precision. I showed him the forged projections side by side with the real numbers from the hidden ledger. I showed him the bank transfers, moving his investment capital into the general operating account, and then the corresponding withdrawals to cover Jacob's expenses. I showed him the manifests from the backdoor sales. Finally, I showed him the new loan application, the one secured by my life, which would have further devalued his own stake in the company. He listened intently, his expression unreadable. He absorbed the complex information with an unnerving speed, his sharp eyes missing nothing. When I finished, he leaned back, steepling his fingers under his chin, and just stared at me for what felt like a full minute. They're not just crooks, he said finally, his voice a low growl. They're arrogant. To think they could pull this on me, and to use their own son as the fall guy. He looked at me, a new respect dawning in his eyes. You're not like them. No, sir, I said. I'm not. So what's your endgame here, Nathan? He asked. You want me to call the Attorney General? We could put them in prison for a decade. And what would be left of the company by then? I countered, using the strategy Danielle and I had rehearsed. It would be picked apart in bankruptcy court. Your investment would be gone. My name would be mud. There's a cleaner way. A corporate solution. He leaned forward, intrigued. I'm listening. We use the evidence to force a change in leadership. We trigger the covenant breach on their existing loans. We create a crisis that only we have the solution to. I have the operational knowledge to know what's salvageable, and you have the capital and the power to force the bank's hand. We take control, cut out the cancer, and restructure the company into something that's actually profitable. A slow, predatory smile spread across Reynolds' face. A palace coup. Precisely, I said. He stood up and walked to the vast window overlooking the city. Your father's retirement party is the social event of the season, I hear. He's planning to officially name Jacob his successor that night. The 16th of next month, I confirmed. It would be a terrible shame, Reynolds said, turning back to me, a glint in his eye. For that coronation to be interrupted by a revolution. He finally extended his hand. Send your notice of covenant breach to the bank. My legal team will follow up with their own demands as concerned shareholders. We'll give them a few weeks to panic. And on the night of the party, we will dismantle them in front of everyone they've ever wanted to impress. We shook hands. His grip was like steel. I had walked in as a whistleblower. I was walking out as a co-conspirator. The fear I had been living with was gone, replaced by a cold, thrilling sense of purpose. The game was on. The 3 weeks leading up to the party were the strangest of my life. I went to work every day and played my part. I was the dutiful, invisible son. I fixed machines, managed the production line, and kept my head down. All the while, I could feel the invisible pressure building within the company's walls. The first tremor hit about a week after my meeting with Reynolds. Gordon Maddox cornered me in the hallway, his face pale and sweaty. Nathan, the bank just put a temporary hold on our main line of credit, he whispered, his eyes wide with panic. They're citing concerns about operational stability. Do you know anything about this? I feigned ignorance. Why would I know anything, Gordon? Dad and Jacob locked me out of the finances months ago. Remember? I walked away, leaving him standing there, wringing his hands. The next week, the second tremor hit. Reynolds' legal team sent a formal letter to the board, demanding a full audit of the Arizona project. The panic in the front office became a palpable thing. I could hear my father yelling behind his closed door. I saw Jacob storming through the hallways, his face a mask of rage and confusion. They knew they were under attack, but they had no idea where the shots were coming from. They never once suspected me. I was the furniture. I was the wallpaper. I was the last person on earth they would consider a threat. The night of the party was surreal. The country club was dripping with opulence. Crystal chandeliers, a string quartet, an endless river of champagne. It was a monument to my father's ego. Hundreds of the state's most influential people were there to pay tribute to him. I arrived alone, dressed in a perfectly fitted dark suit. I felt like a spy, an infiltrator in an enemy stronghold. I took a glass of water from a passing waiter and found a spot in the back of the ballroom, a silent observer watching the final act of a play I had written. I saw my mother, radiant in a sequined gown, holding court with a group of other corporate wives. I saw Jacob, smug and triumphant, accepting congratulations as the heir apparent. And I saw my father, the man of the hour, moving through the crowd, shaking hands, basking in the adoration. He looked like a king on his coronation night. Then came the moment. My father took the stage, the lights dimming, a spotlight finding him at the podium. My friends, he began, his voice thick with emotion, to look out at all of you, to see what we have all built together. It is the honor of a lifetime. He went on for 10 minutes, a rambling, self-congratulatory speech about his vision, his hard work, his legacy. But a legacy is not about one man, he boomed, building to his grand finale. It is about the future, and I can tell you tonight with immense pride that the future of Lane Auto Parts is in the best possible hands. The hands of a brilliant, visionary leader. My son, Jacob. Jacob stood up, his arms raised like a prize fighter, a wide, arrogant grin on his face. The crowd applauded. He was the victor. He had won. And then it happened, not with a bang, but with a quiet, surgical precision. A side door opened and 2 figures entered. They were dressed in dark, severe business suits. One was Reynolds' chief legal counsel, a man with a face like a granite tombstone. The other was the vice president of the commercial lending division from the bank. They moved through the crowd without a word, their expressions grim and determined. They didn't go to the stage. They walked directly to the head table, where my mother and other family members were seated. They were followed by 2 other men in suits, who I recognized as Reynolds' forensic accountants. The lawyer leaned over and spoke quietly to my shell-shocked mother. The banker approached my father's CFO. They began distributing thick, leather-bound folders. A confused murmur rippled through the ballroom. My father, still on stage, faltered. What is the meaning of this? Mark Reynolds, who had been sitting quietly at a table near the front, now stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. All eyes were on him. "Warren, my apologies for the timing," he said, his voice carrying with an icy calm. "But my team has just finished a preliminary review of your company's finances. The results are alarming." He let the word hang in the air. "It seems there are significant discrepancies. Millions of dollars in shareholder investments, including my own, that are unaccounted for. Assets that have vanished from inventory. Projections that appear to have been fabricated." He looked around the room, making eye contact with other known investors in the crowd. "As the largest outside shareholder, I am exercising my right to call an immediate, emergency meeting of the board of directors to discuss the removal of any and all officers who may be compromised by this investigation, which I'm afraid includes you, Warren. And you, Jacob." You could have heard a pin drop. The string quartet had fallen silent. Waiters froze in place. Every single person in that room was staring at my father and brother, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and dawning comprehension. My father stood on the stage, his mouth hanging open, his face turning a blotchy, purplish red. The king had been dethroned in his own court. Jacob looked wildly around the room, his eyes finally landing on me, standing in the shadows at the back. In that moment, he knew. The smugness vanished, replaced by a look of pure, uncomprehending hatred. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just held his gaze for a long moment, my expression a complete blank. Then I turned, set my untouched glass of water down on a table, and walked out of the ballroom. I didn't need to see the rest. The bomb had detonated exactly as planned. The House of Lane was falling, and I was already walking away from the rubble. The emergency board meeting was a formality, a corporate execution carried out with polite, brutal efficiency. I didn't attend. I waited in the club's quiet, wood-paneled library, nursing a cup of coffee. I watched through the leaded glass windows as the night sky deepened from indigo to black. About an hour later, Reynolds' lawyer found me. His face was impassive, but his eyes held a glimmer of professional satisfaction. "It's done," he said, handing me a slim document. "Warren and Jacob have resigned from all positions, effective immediately. They've also surrendered their controlling shares to the creditors' committee, which the bank has appointed Mr. Reynolds to chair." "What about criminal charges?" I asked. "In exchange for their immediate cooperation and the surrender of their shares, the company has agreed not to pursue charges," the lawyer explained. "It's cleaner that way, less public mess." However, he added with a thin smile, "Mr. Reynolds is a private citizen. The company can't stop him from filing his own civil suit for fraud to recoup his personal losses, which he fully intends to do. They won't see the inside of a prison, but they will be financially ruined." I looked down at the document in my hand. It was a legally binding release, signed by the bank and the new interim chairman, Mark Reynolds. It formally severed my connection to both the original convertible note and the cross-collateralization agreement. The chains were broken. I was free. "Mr. Reynolds asked me to tell you that he will be in touch," the lawyer said. "He wants to discuss your potential role in the new, restructured company. He was very impressed with your strategic planning." "Thank you," I said, the words feeling inadequate. I folded the paper and put it in my jacket pocket. It felt like a pardon. I walked out into the cool, damp night air. The parking lot was in chaos, with valets scrambling to bring cars around for the fleeing guests. The party was officially over. As I waited for my truck, I saw them, my father, my mother, and Jacob, standing isolated under a single harsh light pole. A tragic, self-made island. Jacob saw me first, his face already pale, contorted with rage. He started towards me, his fists clenched. You! He spat, his voice cracking. You did this. You snake. You destroyed our family. He might have lunged at me, but my father, in a surprising show of awareness, grabbed his arm. Stop it, Jacob. Not here. My father then turned his tired, bloodshot eyes to me. All the power, all the bluster was gone. He looked like a deflated balloon. He looked like a stranger. Why, Nathan? He asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. Why would you do this to me? To your own family? After everything I've given you? The question was so utterly devoid of self-awareness that it almost made me laugh. Everything I've given you. He'd given me his leftovers, his problems, his contempt. I could have recited a list of his sins. I could have screamed and raged, but I was done with rage. All that was left was a cold, clear calm. I looked him straight in the eye. You sent me a text message, I said, my voice steady and even. You told me I was an embarrassment. You told me not to come to your party. You ended our relationship. I just decided to end the business arrangement that went along with it. I turned my back on them. I got into my truck, the engine rumbling to life with a familiar, comforting sound. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't want to see my mother's tears, my brother's hatred, or the empty, defeated look on my father's face. I drove out of the country club parking lot and didn't look back. The drive home was the quietest I've ever experienced. The rage that had been my constant companion for weeks had finally burned itself out. In its place wasn't triumph or joy, but a vast, profound silence. It was the silence of a battlefield after the war is over. The silence of a clean slate. I had torn down my entire life, and now, standing in the rubble, I was faced with the terrifying and exhilarating task of building a new one from scratch. For the first time, the future was a complete unknown, and it felt like hope. The year that followed was a masterclass in controlled demolition and painstaking rebirth. As predicted, Mark Reynolds financially bled my father and brother dry. The civil suits were merciless and efficient. They lost everything. The sprawling house, the luxury cars, the last vestiges of their social standing. The Lane name, once a symbol of success, became a local shorthand for disgrace. I heard through Danielle that my father was living in a small rented condo across town. A bitter and reclusive man. Jacob, stripped of the family fortune that had been his only real asset, was last seen working a commission-only job at a struggling car dealership. He couldn't hold it for more than a few months. Meanwhile, Reynolds did exactly what he said he would. He dismantled Lane Auto Parts, sold off the profitable divisions, and shuttered the rest. He offered me a lucrative senior management position in the new entity, a golden parachute for my role in the coup. I thanked him but politely declined. I didn't want to be a part of their world, even as a victor. I didn't want to manage something. I wanted to build it. So I took the modest savings I had fiercely protected over the years and I started over. I found a small, greasy workshop for rent in an old industrial park. It was nothing more than a concrete box with a leaky roof and poor lighting, but when I signed the lease, it felt like I was being handed the keys to a kingdom. My kingdom. I bought a second-hand CNC machine and a heavy-duty lathe with the last of my money. I spent a month just cleaning the place, rewiring the electricity, and painting the walls myself. I put a sign over the door. It didn't say Lane. It said Precision Works. A simple name for a simple promise. Quality, honest work. My first few months were brutal. I worked 18-hour days, taking on any small custom fabrication job I could find. I was the machinist, the accountant, the salesman, and the janitor. It was the most exhausting work of my life, but it was a good kind of tired. It was the ache of creation, not the soul-crushing fatigue of constantly fixing someone else's failures. One of my first calls was to Gus. He'd been given a small severance and let go by the new management at the old plant. He was feeling lost. Gus, I said over the phone, I can't pay you what my father did. Not yet, but I can offer you a partnership. 10% of a company that doesn't exist yet. We build it together, we own it together. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, I'll be there on Monday, boss. He wasn't the only one. Other skilled, old-school machinists who had been cast aside by the new corporate culture at the old plant heard what I was doing. They started showing up. They were men like Gus, men who took pride in their work, who were tired of being told to cut corners. We became a small, tight-knit crew. A family, but this time it was one I chose. We faced challenges. Our biggest one came about 6 months in. We landed a contract to produce a complex gear assembly for a medical device company. It required a level of precision we had never attempted before. Our old CNC machine wasn't up to the task. It couldn't hold the required tolerances. The client was threatening to pull the contract. We were on the verge of failure, on the verge of losing everything I had just started to build. I was ready to give up, to tell the client we couldn't do it. But Gus stopped me. "Let me take a look at that machine, Nate," he said. He spent 2 days working around the clock, taking the machine's control unit apart, recalibrating the servos, and writing new code for the controller. He did things with that old machine I didn't think were possible. On the 3rd day, we ran the part again. It was perfect. We delivered the order ahead of schedule. That client is now our biggest customer. A year to the day after the party, I was standing in the middle of my workshop. It was no longer a quiet, empty box. It was filled with the sounds of industry, the hum of well-maintained machines, the banter of a team that respected each other. We had 7 employees, a growing list of clients, and a reputation for doing the impossible. The door to my small office creaked open, and my mother walked in. It was the first time I had seen her in a year. The divorce had been finalized months ago. We hadn't spoken. She looked smaller. The designer clothes and perfectly styled hair were gone. She wore simple jeans and a sweater. There were new lines on her face, but her eyes seemed clearer, less clouded by the constant effort of keeping up appearances. She was holding a Tupperware container. "Hello, Nathan," she said softly. "Mom," I replied, my voice neutral. A wall of caution immediately went up inside me. We stood in a strained silence for a moment, the ghosts of 1,000 unspoken words between us. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I heard from Danielle that you were doing well. I wanted to see it." She looked past me into the bustling workshop. "You built all this." "We built it," I corrected her gently. "Together." She nodded, then held out the container. "I made your favorite, pot roast." I looked at the container and was hit by a wave of nostalgia so powerful it almost knocked me off my feet. The memory of being a small boy, the smell of her pot roast filling the house on a cold afternoon, a memory from a different lifetime, before everything had broken. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an excuse. It was just a pot roast. A simple, fragile gesture. I took it from her. "Thank you." I surprised myself by meaning it. "How are you?" A wry, sad smile touched her lips. "I'm learning how to be Lynette, not Mrs. Lane. I have a small apartment. I'm taking a bookkeeping class at the community college." She looked me in the eye. "I'm proud of you, Nathan. I know I didn't say it enough. I know I failed you. I was a coward." The confession, offered so plainly, disarmed me. Couldn't erase the past, but it acknowledged it. "Yeah," I said, my voice a little thick. "You were." "I know," she whispered. "I'm trying to be brave now." An uncomfortable silence fell again. "Well," I said, clearing my throat, "let me show you what we're working on. We just got a new contract for some aerospace parts. The tolerances are insane." A genuine smile lit up her face. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like that very much." As I walked her through the workshop, explaining the mechanics of a 5-axis mill, I realized that this was how healing began. Not with grand pronouncements of forgiveness, but with small, awkward conversations. With the choice to build a new, fragile bridge over the ruins of the old one. Another year has passed. Today, Precision Works isn't just surviving. It's a leader in its niche. We have 15 employees, all with full benefits and profit sharing. We're in a facility 3 times the size of the old one. My name, the one I built myself, is now associated with quality and integrity. My relationship with my mother is a quiet, steady thing. We have dinner once a month. We talk about her classes. She's at the top of her class, and my business. We don't dwell on the past. We focus on the present. I almost never think about my father and Jacob. They are like characters from a book I read a long time ago. Their pursuit of a legacy left them with nothing. Their names are footnotes in a story of corporate greed. My legacy isn't written in a stock certificate or etched onto a plaque. It's written in the hum of my machines. It's in the sheen of perfectly milled steel. It's in the paycheck that allows my employees to provide for their families. It's in the quiet pride of a job well done. Sometimes, at the end of a long day, I'll stand on the workshop floor after everyone else has gone home, and I'll just breathe it all in. I've learned that freedom isn't about the absence of problems. It's about the freedom to choose your own problems. Revenge is a cage, and for a long time I was trapped in it with them. The moment I stopped trying to punish them and started trying to build something for myself was the moment I was truly free. My father was wrong about me. I wasn't the embarrassment to the family. I was the only one who understood what the name was supposed to stand for in the first place. Building something real, something that lasts. I didn't inherit a legacy. I built one from the ground up with my own 2 hands. And that is a victory no one can ever take away from me. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to tear everything down to build something better? I'd be honored to read your experiences. Please share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss what's next.